You know, one of the most unsettling things about waking up is that it does not begin with enlightenment or bliss or some cosmic fireworks. It begins with loss, a quiet and strangely familiar loss that feels as if life is gently removing what no longer resonates with your deeper becoming. People you once felt close to start slipping away as if you have become a stranger in the very rooms you grew up in. And you cannot quite explain it, can you? You are not angry, you are not superior. You are not trying to change anyone. You have simply begun seeing things a little more clearly, feeling things a little more honestly, as if your inner vision has turned toward a truer light. And suddenly the conversations that once felt comforting now seem strangely empty, almost as if they echo without substance, as if the script has worn thin. And here is the part nobody warns you about. The moment you stop betraying yourself in order to belong, you stop belonging in the places built on that betrayal. Is it not interesting? You think awakening will bring you closer to people, but the first thing it does is remove the ones who only knew the dimmer version of you. It is like you finally turn up the light in a room, and instead of admiring the newfound clarity, half the furniture decides to walk out. Now then, let me put it this way. When you begin to wake up, you do not rise above anyone. You simply rise above the conversations that keep you small. And when you no longer participate in certain patterns, those patterns dissolve. And with them go the people who were attached to them. That is the real shock. Not that you have changed, but that your change reveals the foundation on which many relationships were quietly built. Some were built on your silence, some on your compliance, some on your wounds. And when those wounds begin to close, well, certain bonds close with them. You see, most people do not relate to who you are. They relate to who you were when they met you, and who they needed you to be. So the moment you step outside that frame, the picture no longer makes sense to them. They feel uneasy, threatened, confused. They will say, "You are different," as if it is a crime. But what they are really saying is, "You are no longer holding up the world I built around you." And this is where so many people panic, because losing people feels like losing stability. But as a matter of fact, it is only the old scaffolding falling away, making room for a structure that will not collapse under its own falsehoods. Awakening does not shrink your world. It clears it. And once you understand this, once you stop clinging to what is naturally drifting, the whole process becomes far less frightening and far more liberating. You see, the curious thing about awakening is that it does not announce itself with trumpets. It arrives the way dawn arrives, softly widening your awareness, shifting the way you breathe, reminding you of a stillness that was always there. Stand, listen, listen. And at first you might think nothing has changed, but the world reacts to you. Before you react to it, people sense something different even if you have not articulated it yet. They do not know what happened, but they know something happened. And is it not strange how uncomfortable people become around authenticity? Not because authenticity is abrasive, but because it leaves no shadows for them to hide their illusions. When you begin to see yourself honestly, you begin to see others honestly as well. And many people are terrified of being seen. They would much prefer the version of you who keeps the peace, smooths the tension, laughs at jokes that are not funny, swallows truths that burn the tongue. Awakening takes that version of you away, and so naturally it takes the people attached to that version too. Now then, let me put it another way. Think of a tree. When it begins to grow toward the sun, its branches stretch, its roots deepen, and certain leaves that cannot receive the new light simply fall away. They do not fall because the tree is cruel. They fall because the tree is becoming what it was always meant to be. And in the same manner, when you begin to extend yourself into a more truthful life, those who cannot grow with you will drift, shake loose, and land somewhere else. This is not rejection, it is alignment. But here is where it becomes wonderfully paradoxical. Sometimes the people you lose are not the ones holding you back. They are the ones who remind you of who you used to be. They carry memories, habits, patterns, and identities that you have quietly outgrown. And being around them feels like slipping back into a smaller self, a tighter skin. You can do it for a moment, but it itches, does it not? You feel the discomfort of pretending you are still who you were before the inner shift. That discomfort is a sign, a pattern interrupt, a little tap on the shoulder from your deeper nature saying, "My dear, you are not meant to shrink anymore. And so you begin stepping out of these old shapes. And some people simply do not know how to relate to the new outline of you. Not because they are bad, not because they are unloving, but because they are unfamiliar with the person you are becoming, and they are attached to the person you were. But stay with me, because this leads to an even more fascinating realization about why awakening rearranges your entire social world. And this brings us to a key point. Here is the part that often slips past unnoticed. When you awaken, you stop participating in unconscious agreements. And you would be surprised how many invisible agreements you have made until you stop fulfilling them. Agreements to be the listener, the rescuer, the one who never says no, the one who never asks for more, the one who never questions the unspoken rules. You see, every relationship has a contract, not written on paper, but written in habit. And the moment you begin to live with a little more awareness, you start tearing up these invisible contracts without meaning to. Suddenly, you do not respond with the same enthusiasm to drama. You do not laugh at the gossip. You do not let people cross boundaries you did not know you had. Your tone becomes clearer, your presence more grounded, and others feel it. Sometimes as relief, sometimes as threat. Is it not interesting? A shift in your inner world rearranges the outer one with remarkable force. And this is where the drifting begins. Not with conflict, but with mismatch. You are no longer matching the frequency that kept certain relationships alive. And people feel it. They may say you are distant, or you have changed, or the classic you do not care anymore. But that is not it at all. What is really happening is that the old ways of relating simply do not fit the shape of your consciousness now. Let me put it this way. Imagine you have been humming along at a certain pitch your whole life, and suddenly you shift into a new note. Now, the people who harmonized with the old note can no longer find the tune, not because they are wrong, not because you are right, but because harmony requires resonance. And resonance changes when you do. And here comes the second shock of awakening. You do not just lose people, you lose identities. You lose versions of yourself you did not know you were still carrying. There is the people-pleaser you, the agreeable you, the keep the peace at any cost you, and the small version of you that shrinks so others feel comfortable. When those versions dissolve, the relationships built around them dissolve too. And that can be terrifying at first. You may feel a great emptiness, a kind of inner exhale where all the old roles fall away at once. But this emptiness is not a void. It is a clearing, a spaciousness, a place where the next chapter of your life begins to grow. And the fascinating thing, the thing that dawns on you slowly, is that losing people is not the tragedy you once feared. It is the shedding that allows your life to become more true, more conscious and more aligned than it ever was. But the story does not end here, because awakening does not only remove, it also reveals. You see, once the dust settles, something rather beautiful happens. At first, you do not notice it because you are still looking at the empty chairs where familiar faces used to sit. But gradually, quietly, new kinds of people begin to appear in your life. Not because you sought them, but because your inner shift sends out a different sort of signal. And only those attuned to that frequency can hear it. It is like tuning a radio. The static fades, and new stations appear. People who listen more deeply. People who speak from sincerity. People who do not need you to shrink or perform. People who value presence more than compliance. And you will notice something else. You never have to chase these people. They appear naturally, like a new season, because awakening does not attract more people. It attracts the right ones. But before this happens, there is a strange in-between stage, a spiritual no-man's land, where you are no longer who you were, but not yet anchored in who you are becoming. In this space, you may feel profoundly alone. Not lonely, but alone in the way a seed feels alone just before it breaks open. There is pressure, uncertainty, sense that something is rearranging itself in the dark. And many people misunderstand this part. They think the aloneness means something is wrong. But in truth, the aloneness is the path. Because when the noise quiets, you can finally hear your inner voice. You begin to trust it. You begin to follow it. And slowly, life reorganizes around this truth, drawing in people and experiences that match who you are becoming, not who you were. And as you move through this sacred pause, something surprising happens. You start to see that the people you lost were not lost at all. They simply belonged to a chapter that served its purpose. Awakening gives you a different kind of sight, a sight that looks inward and says, "Now I understand why that had to happen." You begin to see how every silence gave you space, how every ending pointed you inward, how every disconnection brought you closer to yourself. And you will see how often we cling to what is leaving and push away what is arriving, simply because the familiar feels safer than the true. Awakening interrupts this pattern. It removes what keeps you small, not to punish you, but to free you from the weight of outdated self. And here is the quiet miracle. The moment you stop chasing what does not resonate, life begins sending you what does. But it does not send it immediately. There is a gap, a sacred pause, where life tests your willingness to trust. And in that pause, you may feel abandoned, but you are not being abandoned. You are being recalibrated. During this recalibration, you discover something deeply liberating. You no longer fear losing people. You no longer fear the tides of relationship. Because once you see that the ones meant for you cannot leave, and the ones not meant for you cannot stay, you begin to surrender to the natural flow of connection. And in that surrender, you realize awakening never takes anything real from you. It only takes what was never truly yours to hold. And so by the time you reach this point in your awakening, something very gentle settles over you. A quiet confidence, an ease, a lightness. You no longer force what wants to go or cling to what wants to stay. You understand that relationships, like the tides, have their seasons, and that love does not disappear when form changes. Love simply finds new pathways. And life becomes far more peaceful when you stop gripping it by the throat, when you stop demanding that people stay where your imagination placed them. Awakening teaches you that people are not possessions, and connections are not contracts. They are movements of the universe flowing through your experience at exactly the right moment. And here is the most beautiful part. As you awaken, you stop measuring relationships by duration. You begin to feel grateful even for the brief ones, because you see the role they played in your becoming. Every person becomes a teacher. Some teach you love, some teach you fear. Many teach you yourself. And when this finally settles in your heart, you stop mourning departures. You stop resenting distance. You stop asking, why did they leave, and begin asking, what did their presence reveal? And that shift turns sorrow into wisdom. It turns loss into clarity. It turns endings into sacred space. And in that sacred space, something extraordinary happens. You become whole. Not because of who stays or who leaves, but because you have finally returned to yourself. The noise falls away, the performing dissolves, and you discover that awakening was never about losing people. It was about losing the illusions that made you forget your own depth. And once you stand in that depth, once you live from that center, life no longer feels like a series of losses. It feels like a steady return to truth.